What's happening, guys? Michael Corsentino with my October 2019 lighting tutorial for BehindTheShutter.com and Shutter Magazine. So this month is a follow-up of sorts, a follow-up to last month's tutorial, which was all about soft light. And this month, it's the natural follow-up is a discussion of hard light. So I'm going to give you my top tips for creating hard light. All right, so that's what you're looking at here when we're looking at this composite image of a band that I do promotional work for. And hard light was the concept for this, and it works really nicely. There is no perfect light. It really depends on what you're doing, but in some instances, hard light is just great. And in some instances, soft light or softer or harder light is really the ticket. You have a broad spectrum of light. Sometimes light is soft, sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it falls somewhere in the middle. All right, so let's take a look and kind of define what soft light is first, just to kind of reiterate what we looked at last month. And again, right here you're looking at hard light, where you can see that with hard light, the transitions from shadows to highlights happens very rapidly, and there's a lot more contrast than with soft light, and you can see that here. You've got very, very deep dark shadows, and the transition from highlight to shadow happens really quickly. You can see that there's not a gradual transition, which when we have soft light, which you have here, you can see the very soft transition between shadow and highlight, and that really is the distinction between the two. Let's take a closer look, and this really kind of puts a finer point on it. You can see here that the transition between shadows and highlights is very, very gradual, very different compared to this. Right? I think we can all agree that there's a big difference in the quality of light, and that is the difference between hard light and soft light. So with soft light, you're going to have your modifier very close to the subject, and you're going to work with larger modifiers. Okay, those are the kind of go-tos, and definitely look at last month's tutorial to really dig into all things soft light, but this is just kind of recapping, right? Because they both are opposite sides of the same coin. All right, now with hard light, you're going to work with a very small modifier more often than not. And that modifier and light are going to be placed much further away from the subject. Typically, I'm at about 10 to 15 feet away from the subject, and that is going to give you a very different quality of light, a very hard quality of light, and that's what I did to create this. Okay, I worked with a very small modifier with a silver interior, placed it about 15 feet away, and that's going to give you that really specular, contrasty look that's going to give you a very hard light and a rapid transition between highlights and shadows. All right, so if we look at the two again, just again to put a finer point on it, you can see the difference between hard light on the left and soft light on the right. All right, so again, just to look at the two different modifiers that we're going to use to create those. Soft light, we're going to use a large modifier. What you're looking at here in this slide is an Elinchrom, it's a 74-inch octabank, and then a small silver reflector is what we would use for hard light. Okay, so large softbox or large modifier for soft light, and then a small reflector for hard light, or a smaller modifier. There's a whole range of modifiers. We're going to look at a bunch of different modifiers that I use to create hard light. But the same kind of rules really apply. All right. Now there is one sort of caveat here, and that is something called perceived size. Now, perceived size means that you can take that same larger modifier, the one that we're looking at here, again, that large octabank, but if you move it back like 10, 15 feet away from the subject that we were previously using very close for soft light, that light is going to become much harder. Okay, and that is something called perceived size. So if you're working with a medium size or a larger size modifier, don't think that you can't create hard light. You can, but you just need to play by the same rules and move that modifier as far back as you can, given the power of your light, etc. And that is going to give you a harder quality of light. All right, so the top tips are going to be this for hard light. The things that really govern hard light are the modifier size and the modifier shape, the modifier distance, the modifier finish, and I mean the interior finish, whether that's white or silver, and the modifier, whether you use it diffused or whether you use it bare. Obviously, the more diffusion that you have on it, the more diffusion fabric, interior baffle, exterior diffusion, you're going to have a softer quality of light. And again, it still can be hard light, but it's just going to be a little softer depending on how much diffusion. Or you can use that modifier bare, and that is really going to give you a harder quality of light. All right, we talked about perceived size, and again, just to reiterate, that is where you use larger modifiers, but you move them much further away from your subject than you normally would when you're working with soft light. So that is exactly what I did for this image, okay? So there are circumstances where you're going to want to do that or when you'll need to do that, and full figure is one of those instances, okay? So I needed to get a full vertical shaft of light in order to cover this subject. So what I did was I used two 2x3, I think, or 3x4 softboxes, stacked one on top of the other, with no diffusion on them, so that it was silver, so it created a really specular, contrasty light, and gave me the coverage that I needed vertically from top to bottom. And they were placed about 15 feet away from the subject, which gave me that really nice hard quality of light. And there was a second zone of light illuminating the background. So that created the white background, but that's what was going on here. That's how I created this image. Now, you can use all sorts of modifiers to create hard light. It doesn't just have to be a hard reflector like we're using here, softboxes. I've also used umbrellas. Here's another image that I did for that band, obviously a location image. And in this image, I used a large, or really kind of a medium-sized deep umbrella, Profoto umbrella with a silver interior. And I did that because, again, I needed the coverage. I needed a modifier that was with a large enough size that would throw enough light. I wanted something deep. The deeper the modifier, the quicker the fall off. We're going to see that in a couple of the other images throughout this presentation, which also lends itself to that kind of harder light look. And obviously you can see here that it's a very hard light look. The silver interior is doing that, and in addition to that, the distance from the band. So kind of the best of all worlds. I'm getting the coverage that I need, the circle of light that I need large enough to illuminate the band. The distance is giving me that hard light look, and the silver interior is giving me that contrast boost that really makes the image sing. Okay, next image. This also is using an umbrella. Here I've got the umbrella placed above at ceiling height. The ceiling height is about 12 feet. And it is illuminating the model below. And again, that's a silver umbrella. The light is pointed up into it, and it's bouncing the light back down. So it's not quite as hard because it's bounce back light. Again, it's that kind of harder than soft, but still not super duper hard, but it gives you that nice punchy kind of specular look that works well for this kind of image. Definitely not a soft quality of light, but not as hard per se as that. Okay, all right, let's move on to our last set of images. This was for an editorial and lovely model Audra. And for this, I used a Mola SETI, which is a very kind of conical shaped modifier with a white interior. I tried this with silver, and it was just a little too specular, a little too punchy. But this was kind of the perfect fix to give me just the right amount of hard light and specularity that I wanted for this series of images. So you can see here the light has a little bit less direction than some of the other lights, but you can still get a really contrasty hard light look without having a super amount of direction like this, for example. And there's lots of fill here. I've got fill cards on the opposite side of the light, that would be camera right, opening up the shadowed side of the face, and there's a second zone of lights illuminating the background, but we're still getting a really beautiful specular, punchy, hard light that works well for this kind of imagery. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this month. That kind of rounds everything out, gives you the soft light last month and the hard light this month. So definitely experiment with these techniques. You can see there's a whole range of modifiers that you can use. The easiest and least expensive being the umbrella. So if you are just starting out and you want to try this, definitely pick up an umbrella and give it a shot. And I will see you next month here at BehindTheShutter.com and Shutter Magazine.